hopefully, those of you who are gathering with family this week will have lovely conversations with meaningful moments.
For a lot of us, though, we will be presented with some opportunities to tackle tough topics. So here to help us navigate through these conversations about race and to talk about the new book, here we got Seena Hodges, the founder and CEO of The Woke Coach. Well, first of all, welcome here. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Why don't we start with these conversations? I'm wondering, can we start with sort of your best piece of advice as we walk into the Thanksgiving holiday?
Yeah, so my best piece of advice is to think about your options and to think about your outcomes, right? So an unpopular opinion as it relates to your options is, do you even have to go? You know, think about that, because when we go into these scenarios that are really traumatic and heart-wrenching, and people, you know, people sometimes think that trauma has to look like a car accident with blood on the ground and glass, but that's not true. You know, if we're raising our cortisol levels, we're really impacting our lifespan, right? So essentially, do you have to be there, right? And that's the first option. On the other side is the outcomes piece, and the outcomes piece is, what do you want to have happen?
Interesting to think about.
Yeah, and so what are you trying to achieve? If you know that you are one of the only people who has a certain perspective or opinion about the world, then you're not going to sit at a table and change the minds of everyone who's sitting at a table, right? So perhaps what you want to do is get that one cousin, right? And perhaps before you go, you want to find that one cousin so that you and that cousin have a conversation, and maybe you have a safe word, right? And so that then the cousin knows, oh, okay, perhaps we change the subject. Or if you can get yourself into a situation with your family, maybe you all come up, if you know that it can be potentially, you know, you can go all out, then what happens if you have rules of engagement? What if there are things that you just don't talk about, and you put those things to the side, right? But I do think that you have to really be conscious of what your options are. Think about yourself, and then what outcomes do you want to achieve? Having
those conversations ahead of time and knowing ahead of time, preparation, that's going to be key in these situations.
Absolutely, you have to prepare. That's the key. That's the key part, because otherwise you're caught in it, right? Because you really want to enjoy that mac and cheese. Right? Because that's what you're there for. You know, you want to eat, you want to see your family that you haven't seen in a long time, and it's really difficult to do that if you've got this cloud hanging over the whole day.
Notice she didn't say turkey. She said mac and cheese.
Well, she's correct.
Has there been some conversation about that?
Not everybody here loves turkey.
Just put it out there.
But Seena, what I think is interesting here is you know, we do this story a lot. You talk to different psychologists, and a lot of them will tell you, you know, just avoid the subject. And I don't think that's what I'm hearing from you.
No, I think, you know, at a point, ignoring the subject is why we're still having this conversation about having difficult conversations, right? So we don't get to ignore the subject, but I think, for example, you have to figure out, again, what your outcome is and what do you want to achieve. If you can find that one person in your family who you think might be receptive to having a conversation, set up an opportunity to have a conversation with that person, right? And sometimes it's easier to have a conversation one-on-one than it is to have with a whole table full of your relatives and your friends. So essentially, I think what you can do is you can take that one person, and you can, even before the holiday or after the holiday, just have a conversation with them and say, let's just talk about things. What you have to do, though, before you get ready for that conversation is you have to understand what your triggers are. Like, what are the things that are going to make you upset? And because you're initiating the conversation, you have to be willing to put some of those things aside, right? You also have to be willing to listen in a way that you may have never listened before, which could be difficult, right? And so you have to hear where people are coming from. And for that conversation, you can state ground rules. The most important thing to remember, though, is that a single conversation is not going to change anything, right? And it's also not about trying to make someone believe your perspective and your way of thinking about things. It's about broadening each other's perspectives. That's the goal of the conversation. Broadening and shaping each other's perspectives. So essentially, the other piece is to remember that what you're not doing is trying to solve it in one conversation, and you're trying to chip away. Right?
See, I'm curious to know, we're talking about your book here. What's been the reaction to your book? And also tell us more about your book.
Absolutely. You know, the reaction that I've been getting from the book is that people love it. And people think, you know, one person said to me, I read your book in 2 days. I could not put it down. I read it in 2 days. And I think it's the thing that's really important about this book is that it is it's anecdotal, so it's a lot of the stories about some of the clients that I've worked with, but it's also, it gives you prompts. It coaches you. So you get to do some of that self-work that's really critical. And the interesting part about that self-work is that sometimes we don't want to do that work in front of other people. Sometimes we need to get ready for prime time, right? And so this book is the book that will help you get ready for prime time.
Because it gives you concrete ideas of actual action items. And
Absolutely.
I think a lot of times there are many people who say, I don't even know where to start to have these discussions, to have these conversations, to take some action. What does it mean to be an anti-racist? What does it mean to be an ally, an accomplice, all of those things? And what I love about this is that you make it in a way, and I don't want to say easy to digest, because these aren't easy conversations, but you at least let them a way for people to get started.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that's the most important part of it. You know, the willingness to go on a journey has to be there, but then you actually have to go on the journey. Right. And that's the piece of it that's critical. So even going back to talking about these dinners, like, we have to be willing to engage. Right? That is our collective responsibility. If it's just like if I saw a piece of paper on the floor, I have to be willing to pick it up, right? So you have to be willing to do the thing that you're looking at and you're like, well, wow, this isn't working.
Just broadening this out, is that the problem that we're having just as a society today, that so many of us just do not want to engage? Is that part of it, and having this acknowledgement of it?
I think there's an acknowledgement that, you know, a lot of these issues, you know, some people feel like a lot of these issues aren't my fault. I didn't do this, they exist. But also what people have to recognize is that even though a lot of these issues aren't our faults, we still live with them. And because we choose to not pick the paper up off the floor, we're saying it's okay, right? And so by inaction, you're still moving to action, right? It might not be any action, but also what that does is that says to people that it's okay to not participate, right? You know, in the book, I write about a career experience that I had that was a pretty trashy career experience, pardon the pun. But at the end of the day, a lot of people have those experiences and you don't talk about those things, right? And so how can we talk about these things? Because if we talk about them, it doesn't mean that we're pointing to people saying that people are bad people. It means that we're broadening our perspectives and we're saying, you know what? I work in a situation where I could probably be a better accomplice to a colleague.
Yeah, and I think also going back to what you had said earlier is that you need to figure out the way to actually listen to what people are saying. So, okay, you start the conversation, but then don't be the defensive one immediately right away. Like, just listen to what someone has to say.
Absolutely, and I'll push that a little bit further. Listen, but also believe people when they tell you about their circumstance, right? Because that's the other part of it. At this point, nobody's making up stuff just to get attention, you know, especially in a work context. Because honestly, what people want to do is they want to go to work, they want to do their jobs, and then they want to go home. But if someone is a colleague and they're telling you about their experience and they're saying that they're having a challenging time or that this is happening, believe them.
So, you know, this is an important conversation, and we could spend, I feel like, I don't know, the next half hour discussing this. Is there one thing that you want people to take away from this book?
Yeah. When people read this book, I really want them to take away the fact that it's possible. Change is possible. And you have to be a part of that change.
Last time we chatted with you, all of it was on pre-order, but now the time has come. Is it today? Is it tomorrow? When is it?
It was yesterday. Yesterday we launched it, but it's available right now. You can get this book right now.
Okay.
Yes.
Seena, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for having me.
Always great to be with you.